Hello and welcome to The Home Experience, a podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows currently available on the home market. I'm Adam Barnard.
And I'm Jackson Smith.
And today we're going to be discussing Saturday Night Fever. So Saturday Night Fever is a movie that I think we both have very unique connections to in kind of separate ways. I first discovered this movie, I think it was 2016, and I had taken a bit of a leave of absence from college, and it was a difficult time in my life, and I was using kind of this downtime and personal reconstruction to catch up on a lot of classics that I hadn't seen yet or I skipped the screenings for in film school, like a good student does. But so I saw Saturday Night Fever was on Netflix one day, and I had actually heard about it through Ryan Johnson. Was listening to a lot of Looper interviews, and he had said that this movie was a big influence for some of the stuff with Joe and the club and kind of the visual vibe he was trying to evoke. And I really enjoyed that movie a lot, so I thought, okay, like let's kind of, I like to trace creative ideation back to their roots, and whatever classic movie kind of first planted them in modern directors' heads. So anyways, I go to Netflix, I'm really tired, I turn this movie on and I'm just electrified. Like from the first few minutes, I can tell it's something special, and the entire story just feels like divinely crafted, and it's incredibly multi-layered, and I came alive while watching it. And I right after I finished the movie, I got on chat with you and I said, oh my God, I just saw the most amazing movie. Like, this is why I want to make movies. Like, this is why I want to go back to film school and be back in California. And it was just like a personal revival through the movie. And at the time, I was also writing a short film for you that you were going to direct in a couple months. And lo and behold, it turns out the teacher of your class was actually John Badham, who directed Saturday Night Fever. And I had no idea the guy I was getting notes from, because I was reading his emails. I was reading his notes.
You were getting his notes, really?
Yeah. You had forwarded some of them to me,
so
and you had included me in these email chains. And I mean, I knew he directed War Games, but I didn't realize he directed Saturday Night Fever. And all of a sudden you were like, bro, like, why are you so excited? Like, this guy, like, we're making a movie for him.
I totally forgot I had sent his notes to you, but yeah, when you had said that, you were like, oh my gosh, John Badham's your directing teacher. I hadn't seen this movie. I'd seen War Games, and of course I love War Games. Who doesn't love War Games? So I was very stoked to be in his class, but I had never seen this movie, so I obviously didn't have quite the visceral reaction to him that you had. But I mean, like, he was a really, really amazing directing teacher. I mean, like, growing up in LA and going to one of the top film schools in the country, which I'm just very lucky and blessed to have done, you get taught by a lot of professionals and a lot of really smart filmmakers who really know their way around the industry. But John Badham's exceptional. I mean, like, this is, love it or hate it, whatever you think of Saturday Night Fever, it is simply one of the most iconic movies of all time. Like he kind of single-handedly set the tone for a whole subculture. He kind of revived this whole subculture, disco culture in the late 70s, and of course out of it came this iconic soundtrack. Out of it came John Travolta. I mean, like, this movie is a stone cold classic. So getting to be taught under someone like John Badham, I mean, I think it reflected really well on our movie, on Elevate. I think his notes and his sort of perspective on filmmaking really, helped me refine that into an excellent product.
Yeah, and we now finally have Elevate on the channel. I mean, you made it like 2.5 years ago, and we're finally at the stage where we can put it up publicly.
Yeah, so if you're curious, go and check it out on the channel. John, I gave John a special thanks in the credits because, like I said, yeah, his input was invaluable, and he is just, oh man, I mean, he's such a cool guy. He's like 80 something, and he would leave every 3 weeks to go direct another episode of Supernatural in Vancouver. Like, he was like still working. It was crazy. Like, What a dude. What a dude.
Yeah, it's cool to be a benefactor of that kind of wisdom and knowledge. I think
Totally.
as a
Yeah.
student and being, you and I were very young and impressionable and learning how to tell stories. I will say I'm very glad that I saw Saturday Night Fever without knowing who directed it, because now I can authentically say I had a honest reaction to it. It wasn't just, oh, I know this guy, he's going to executive produce our film. And so it was just, I really think this film is a misunderstood masterpiece, and I cannot wait to dive in.
This is the landmark film that made Oscar nominee John Travolta a superstar on the dance floor.
Hey, Tony, you know something? You're the king out there. You're great. Great dancers. You could do as good as me if you practice.
Okay, listen. I like it. We could dance together. That's it. We could just dance together and nothing more, nothing personal.
With help from a beautiful dance partner, he's on a quest to be the best and escape the violent streets of New York.
And what happened to your face, huh?
Oh, I cut myself shaving.
With a switchblade, huh?
Are you gonna do something with your dancing? I don't know. People ask me all the time. Tony, the only way you're gonna survive is to do what you think is right. Now we have Stephanie Mangano and Tony Manero.
Relive the music of an entire generation with John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever.
Saturday Night Fever is directed by John Badham and written by Norman Wexler. It's available to stream for free with an Amazon Prime membership. The story follows a young John Travolta as Tony Manero, a teenager working at a hardware store and living with his Italian family in 1970s Brooklyn, who moonlights as a disco superstar at a local dance club and ultimately falls in love with another dancer from the other side of the tracks. Or I guess river, because they're in New York, so other side of the river.
Yeah.
So Adam, what did you? I mean, obviously you hate this movie, so
Oh, it's shit. Yeah.
terrible
no.
movie.
I think once in a while a movie comes along and defines a time period, and not just necessarily because of a gimmick. Like, I don't know if a score is a gimmick, but like a score isn't the movie. It isn't the core statement of a movie. It's a different art form that's coming to complement the story and the characters and the statement of the film. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This movie, it is, I think, like, it's almost like a working class story about the working man, and it's a story about dance and disco and New York, and it feels like a time capsule. It feels like something that you can study from the future as an artifact, and that's also great, but it makes a very profound statement on the whole coming of age genre and kind of sneaks in the whole coming of age dynamic. Like, it could have just been a very, very cool dance movie. Instead, it's something a lot more than that. At least that's how I interpret it. Some people maybe don't see that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it is, I mean, it's kind of interesting that you brought up the soundtrack in that, because this is, I mean, the soundtrack by the Bee Gees is probably the most famous film soundtrack of all time. I think it's
the best selling.
It might be either that or The Bodyguard. I don't know. But I mean, like, look at The Bodyguard, for instance. Great soundtrack. Horrible movie. Who remembers that movie? Where it's like, this movie, you're right. I think they didn't even have the soundtrack when they did the movie. So it's not a movie built around songs. It's a movie which is a solid, great movie in and of itself, and then has these great songs to accompany it. I really liked it. I mean, they're just the amount of filmmaking craft you see on display.
It's incredible.
the nuance of the performances. It's just a really amazing movie. Like you said, and just a really great portrait of the 70s. It's just, I will say, and I have to be honest, it is profoundly weird going back and watching this thing in 2018, because I mean, just personally, like, I mean, I had known about Saturday Night Fever. I knew Saturday Night Fever was a thing. I knew this, Staying Alive, the dance sequences and whatnot, but I had no idea just how much culture came from this one movie.
Right?
You just don't realize just how much culture a single movie can generate. And it's just,
that's why I loved it. That's exactly why I loved it. And it's something where, it is completely revered. It is a icon in cinema history, but I almost feel like it's an icon for different reasons. That, you know, for different reasons for different people. For me, it's like this character study and this cultural time capsule. For others, it might just this pure enigma of the dancing and the music and the scenery. That might be enough. Like that might be enough for them to say this is fantastic, and that's why I watch it once a year. And that's what's interesting. There's so much for every walk of life to relate to in some way, or to find a part of themselves on the screen. And maybe that's honestly why it's so successful, because it means different things to different people.
Totally. Yeah, I want to sort of expand on that a little bit, because I came into watching this movie, right? And I've obviously I had John Badham as a directing teacher, and then, you kept telling me how great this movie was, and then the soundtrack is so iconic. So, coming into this movie, I don't really even know what I was expecting. And what I got was, this really, dare I say, like, gritty character drama. I mean, it was like, this is a very brutal movie, and brutal for its time period, but like especially nowadays, you watch this movie and it hurts. Like, this is a movie that hurts. It's an incredibly intimate portrait of a lifestyle and of a particular person living that lifestyle, and the problems that lifestyle brought about, and it's a hard movie to watch. It's a hard movie to sit through. And it completely caught me off guard, because, this soundtrack is so much fun to listen to. And the impression with this movie was that it's this fun dance movie. I saw Dirty Dancing for the first, I remember I called you right after I saw it too. I saw Dirty Dancing for the first time, like, earlier this year. I'm catching up on all my dance movies, folks. I saw Dirty Dancing, and it was like exactly what I expected. I saw that movie. I was like, that is exactly what I thought it would be, in like the best way possible. I love Dirty Dancing. And then I see this movie, I'm like, it feels much more like something Martin Scorsese would make than Dirty Dancing, which I think really works to its benefit. I mean, like you said, it sort of demands to be looked at from a bunch of different angles and can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, and that's what I think has made it such an enduring classic.
Right. And like Dirty Dancing was kind of building to that Act 3 moment, that Act 3 sequence. It was very much a traditional Hollywood movie. And this movie, kind of like a Scorsese movie, is all over the place and just bursting at the seams with energy. And the story is go, 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 go. I mean, I want to talk about the intro. Like, within the first few minutes of the movie, even though the character Tony Manero has barely said anything, you just understand him.
Oh, you get him.
There's this happy music on top of it, but it's telling a not so happy, very layered story, and it's painting this portrait of the character without having to introduce him through a ton of like dialogue scenes. And so like within 10 minutes, you've already hit the ground running. You get, this is Tony Manero. He lives in an okay neighborhood, a little bit of a rough neighborhood. He works at a paint store. He has a chip on his shoulder. He's incredibly arrogant and superficial. He's hiding family issues right beneath the surface, and he dances his ass off to forget all the aforementioned burdens. And he becomes a local superstar. He becomes an icon of his community, and he has to figure out, is this who I'm going to stay? Am I going to burn out? Am I peaking right now? Or am I going to wake up and realize that, all this confidence is really just me trying to convince myself I'm doing all right? And just to introduce that so efficiently, and to add in, really realistic but traumatizing family dynamics, it takes a master to make this work, and it really works.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting what you said about, with most other dance movies, you're usually building towards the dance, and the dance is kind of the centerpiece of the movie. And I guess if you were to talk about a plot in relation to Saturday Night Fever, like what happens is, Tony meets this girl, her name is Stephanie. She's played by Karen Lynn Gorney, and she's this amazing dancer. She's very attractive and very, not interested, which of course makes him interested. And, and they decide to join this dance competition at the local disco club. And the movie is sort of about them getting this dance routine together and, performing at the dance club. But it's so interesting how how inconsequential that final dance ends up being, just in the grand scheme of things. Because that's the thing, is it's like the movie's not about the dance, it's about the character. And the whole movie, the whole 2 hours of the movie is just built on peeling back all the layers of this subculture and peeling back all the layers of Tony and trying to figure out, who is this guy and who is this guy going to be specifically? Because, like it's easy to forget, with the sort of God status that both this movie and this character have attained, that he's a 19-year-old kid. I mean, like,
it's hard to remember when you're watching it.
It's and being a 19-year-old kid, this movie really, I think, really gets at the cockiness and the insecurity and the disillusionment that comes about with going from your teenage years into your 20s and having to decide sort of like who you are and what you're going to do, because you can't live your entire life on the dance floor. And I think that's the whole point of the movie.
Yeah, I think it's crazy to see that character so oblivious to kind of the malaise he's living in, because when you're young, affirmation, whether it's sex or familial love or career recognition, I mean, it drives you. And I can speak to that because I'm not so far away from the place that this character was in, age wise or lifestyle wise, and it's something where at some point you start to realize you're just putting a band-aid on a wound. You're not actually making strides forward with your life. But because you're so happy that people like you, or you have that gratification, you struggle to find a greater purpose when you're young, because you don't know what a greater purpose is. You're just experiencing everything for the first time. I like how Tony has this kind of shit-eating grin wherever he goes. Like, he's just so happy to be talking to whoever he's talking to, even if he's playing a game. Like, I just thought the pure charisma of his character was just so watchable.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that's John Travolta. I mean, like, John Travolta has had an interesting career, to say the least. But I do still firmly believe he's an excellent actor, and really, yeah, I mean, he really puts all of that. He really puts all that vulnerability on display, but also all of that confidence. I mean, it's like, that's what I mean when I say I think this movie completely gets what being a 19-year-old feels like, because I mean, it's just a completely honest portrayal of that particular point in life. You're right. He does walk into every single room thinking he's hot shit. We know he's not, obviously.
Right.
But it's that confidence he displays from his walk to his expressions to his smile that just really sells this performance and sells this movie.
And I think the funny thing is, the point of the movie, in my opinion, is that this is a rabbit's hole you don't want to go down. You want to visit, and then you want to get the hell out. The thing is, I feel like some people might think, oh yeah, I mean, look how cool these guys are. Like, that the club is awesome. Like, the 70s were great. And like, and that's, that is an element. And we might like that as a, removed observer of the film, but like, the film is making a statement.
It is, yeah. Any time you have a movie that is really trend-setting, no matter what it is, you always sort of run the risk of having it being misinterpreted. I mean, I know this is a weird, totally out of left field example, but I feel like Fight Club is one of those movies, right, where like the whole point of that movie is Tyler Durden is the worst. He is the uber villain. You do not want to be like Tyler Durden. And I feel like the general attitude towards that movie is, man, I love Brad Pitt in that movie. Tyler Durden's so cool. Everybody's got t-shirts with Tyler Durden quotes on them. And it's like, yeah, you almost look at that and you're like, you kind of missed the point, But it also, I think in both that and in both Fight Club and this, I think it really speaks to just how well made it all is. I mean, like, yeah, I don't think this movie isn't in and of itself an advertisement for disco culture. If anything, I think you're right. I think the whole movie exists to say, like, this is a fantasy, and at the end of the day, the music ends and you have to come back to reality, and you have to have a reality to come back to.
Yeah.
But because we're seeing the whole movie from Tony's perspective, and from Tony's perspective, disco is this amazing, incredible thing, disco in this movie is this amazing, incredible thing. And you walk away from the movie sort of with this perception of the club and with this perception of dance that is so ethereal and inflated, and I think in reality actually contributed to disco becoming a thing again. I haven't done too much research on it, but I mean, like, this movie was very influential in sort of like getting disco culture back on its feet after
Really?
it went through a bit of a
Yeah,
lull
wow.
in the 70s. So
Well, like it's interesting, like you were saying earlier about Scorsese. Like a Scorsese film, the glamour is magnetizing. Like
It
like in
is,
The Wolf
yeah.
of Wall Street, the things that Jordan Belfort does is just like you can't take your eyes off the screen. You're like, holy crap! Like,
Yeah.
he's living this adventure that you almost want to be there to live, until you realize how corroded the ideals are of these people's realities. So it's also
Yeah.
like a bit of a cautionary tale, I feel like, which is another interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it's a cautionary tale, but I think first and foremost, I think it's a coming of age tale. Like, I think the journey in this story is Tony's journey to adulthood. I mean, I think he ends the movie with a wildly different perspective on his lifestyle and himself and the world around him than when he began. So I think structurally speaking and narratively speaking, I really think it falls into the category of coming of age tale, which again, I would not have thought unless I had seen the movie. That's not
Yeah.
what this movie is advertised to the world as. But that's what it is.
And also in kind of more traditional Hollywood movies, we've come to expect that third act character change, where the character becomes his better self. In this movie, it's like a third act character regression. Like, he tries to rape Stephanie towards the end of the movie.
Oh, man.
And like she, he the final scene of the film is him visiting her condo, and she says like, well, I don't know if I want to let you in. I've never let a rapist into my apartment
Yeah.
before. And that kind of hits you like a ton of bricks. You're like, God, have I been watching like a complete degenerate this whole time? And, obviously the last scene packs its own wallop in terms of showing the first signs of a change for Tony. But like, it's really a dirty ending. You kind of feel gross and tired because it's not.
Yeah.
And it subverts a lot of genre conventions and expectations of what maybe a dance movie or what a John Travolta starring vessel might be.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk a bit about the rape element too, because like
Sure.
that's another thing that totally struck me off guard when I watched this movie, just how horribly the women in this movie are treated. Not by the movie.
Oh my God,
I mean,
right.
not by the movie. I actually think this movie, more than other similar movies of that time period, goes out of its way to offer something of a female perspective. But how the women are being treated by the characters in the movie is far from pleasant. I mean, like, even Stephanie, like, the beginning of her and Tony's relationship is so contentious. Like, he'll like stalk her, and then he'll like ask her out, and she'll say no, and then he'll get like really angry, and it's just like the hallmarks of an abusive relationship. I think probably back in the 1970s, people would watch that and be like, oh, this is the meet cute. They're just being cute with each other. But it's like, nowadays we can watch that and say like, ooh, which I think only enriches the movie's point, which is that no, Tony is not living his best life at all.
Yeah,
and
exactly,
Stephanie is very much a victim of that. But I actually ended up really liking their relationship. I thought it evolved and the dynamics were really good. I wanted to hear sort of what you thought about them as a couple.
Well, she kind of calls him out on his BS. The whole point, I think, is that other women kind of let Tony tread all over them, and that is one of the more gross elements. But then he finally meets his match in the sense of she's not impressed by his antics, she's not impressed by his confidence. She's willing to give him the time of day, but only if he provides a certain modicum of respect or reciprocation, that she's not just a sex object, there's an actual friendship or dynamic. And that's ultimately the catalyst for the self-reflection within Tony, to see, wow, I've met someone who's making me take a look at myself. In the past, I just want people to worship me. I'm just looking for people to worship me, or people I can play games with to make myself feel better. Now I have to actually have a human relationship. And yeah, to your point, he's really disgusting in his behavior toward her. I mean, his friends are catcalling her. It's kind of like she's the next prey that he gets to stalk down, is kind of how she's presented. And especially, building off a precedent of his reactions with other women that we've seen earlier in the movie. It thankfully does evolve into something that's more mature. And I think what's interesting also is that her character isn't portrayed as Little Miss Perfect. Like, everyone criticizes her for being a snob, but she does have her own flaws. You know what I'm saying? It's not like, Tony is her pet project, or she's kind of constantly lecturing him. It is a dynamic where they learn from each other. Another character that I think is a parallel to Stephanie is Annette, which I know you have an interesting angle for. And there's kind of like a dichotomy where he's two-timing, Tony's two-timing between the two of them, essentially, and he's playing with both their feelings, and he ends up getting burned because of that, really.
Yeah. No, yeah, Annette, for those of you who might not have seen it yet, she's another girl at the dance club who's danced with Tony a couple of times and's got a very big crush on him. But he, I guess for lack of a better word, just enjoys treating her like shit, is constantly saying, oh, you can dance with me, or you can this with me. And then, and then flat out rejects her. And it's like, and all of his friends kind of, like messing with her too. And it's just this constant barrage of really just this constant barrage of sexism against her for no other reason than I guess she just really has a thing for Tony, which she does. I mean, like, as the movie goes on, it's increasingly obvious that she is, if not in love with him, at least in love with what he represents, and in love with this sort of in love with the ideal, this sort of god on the dance floor that he is, who we all know watching the movie is clearly not his real life, because he lives with his family and works at a paint store. But she's really fallen for him, and yeah, they just really treat her horribly. I was just astonished, as a 21st century viewer, just how much this character gets shit on, really.
There's a lot of profound emotional moments in this movie that, like I say, it packs a wallop or it hits you like a ton of bricks, because like there's that one scene where he has to confront Annette and basically tell her that he's traded her in for Stephanie, his newest interest. And he says, we're not going to be dance partners. I'm sorry, I can't do this. And she like starts crying, and she's like, all I ever did was like you.
Oh, that line.
What have I done to hurt you? And I was just like, oh, that's so true.
No, yeah, I watched this. I watched this with my sister. We sat down, we watched it together, because she was home over Thanksgiving break, and I was watching this movie, and she was like, oh, I think she had seen parts of it before and was interested on giving it a second watch, and she couldn't finish it. She
really?
walked out about halfway through the movie, specifically because of how the movie was, not the movie, but how they were treating the Annette character. And it's actually probably good that she walked out, because I mean, it just gets worse.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
They end up gang raping her at the end, spoiler alert, which is, just the most, ugly, uncomfortable scene in a movie I've seen, 70s or not. And then after it all happens, Tony takes instead of, consoling her or telling his friends off or doing anything a decent human being would do, basically calls her a slut, which is kind of like the big, kick in the nuts for, this character has regressed to a stage of absolute horridness that he can only sort of come up from. But yeah, and honestly, like, I really don't blame my sister, because it's like, this movie does confront its reality very head on, and its reality is you know, when you take away the disco ball and when you take away the Bee Gees music, it's an ugly reality, specifically an ugly reality for women.
Yeah, I think I really appreciated that the movie only brought in graphic elements when there was a sincere character purpose to this, or there's a sincere thematic intention. It wasn't like, oh, let's be gross and let's just show this. Like, when it happens, there are ramifications, or there are revelations that are made, or it's brought in to kind of show the audience, maybe subvert their expectations and say, you thought you knew who you were with, or you thought you knew what this character was like. Let me show you what they're going to actually be like in their worst hour, or let me show you what they're going to actually be like when they're presented with a temptation. In that sense, like, I think I can't say it's going to be easy for everyone to watch, but I don't think it's just put in for shock value. And having seen that a second time, I can honestly say it, because the first time it caught me off guard so much, I was wondering, like, am I watching a morally reprehensible film?
It's like how much of this is the 70s? Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing is, like, on the second watch, I really did hone in on the fact that the movie is saying this is not okay. Like, it's not kind of like giving that PG-13 version of a rape or sex scene because it's trying to show you, no, this is what it's like when people take advantage of each other. And this is what it's like when people let themselves get out of control. And it hurts, but like I say, it's profound. I'm still affected by this movie, and I'm probably going to go back and watch it several more times because it is a dark character study that I think almost needs to be told.
I am so curious to see what the PG version of this movie looks like.
that one airs on like AMC or whatever.
Yeah, well, because it exists. It exists, and not only does it exist, but like they released it in theaters because a little bit of history for all you guys. Like, the soundtrack ended up being so popular that Paramount, recut the movie, for a PG rating. Wow. And released it in theaters because teenagers were the ones buying the soundtrack and they couldn't go see the movie. So the PG version of this movie is something that a lot of people were initially exposed to. And it's like, upon watching this movie and looking at all of the rape and horribleness, I'm like, how on earth do you get a PG version of that? I have no idea. I'm so curious. I need to know. It's just so integrated into the plot.
Like, there's a whole sequence in the beginning of the movie where you're first introduced to Tony and his bros, for lack of a better word. The first half of the scene is them talking about how they're going to share the car to have sex with girls in graphic detail. And then they start saying and using racial slurs what it's like to have sex with women from different demographics. I know
the scene you're talking about.
And it's gross.
Either sexist or it's racist. Pick your poison. Well, it's like, there's a PG-13 version of Deadpool coming out later this month. So
that's going to be fascinating.
It's stranger things have happened, but I don't know.
So one thing that I think is interesting with the film, and a theory that I want to put forth, is that the movie is not told from like an objective standpoint. The movie is told through Tony's eyes. Like, we only start making a lot of revelations once Tony makes those revelations. For example, when we first enter the scene, even after the very, disgusting sequence where they're walking up and talking about sex and that kind of stuff, once you get in the club, it's vibing. The entire montages and the introductions are designed to evoke, excitement and awe. Mm-hmm. And they make 2001, the club, look like the coolest place on earth. Later in the movie, once Tony and Stephanie, their relationship or interaction starts to develop, and she sows seeds of doubt in his mind about who he is and what he's trying to do, and is he actually hot shit? When he comes back to the club, it is not shot in a way that evokes any kind of excitement. It actually is the angles and the way it's cut together makes it feel drab and dirty and claustrophobic. And I so appreciated that the fact that the movie, I think, really honed in on what the character was feeling and kind of revealed the different plot beats through his eyes.
Yeah, I wish I had seen this movie, while I was still at Chapman and specifically still taking Badham's class, because I did have a lot of questions specifically in regards to the way it was shot. Right. I think they did something with the lens to add all of these glows to the lights whenever you're in the club or around the club. I can't tell if they like rubbed Vaseline on it or if it was something to do with the kinds of lenses that they use, but for whatever reason, like when you're in the club, you feel like you're in this starscape, this otherworldly starscape.
Yeah,
And that's sort of accomplished through the cinematography and through the camera angles. And I think you're right. Like what it does is it makes, it makes the club and it makes the dance floor feel like a whole nother plane of reality. And which is so true to the reality of the story, because in a way, Tony is existing on another plane of reality. He's not living in reality. He's living in the reality where he is, Mr. Hot Shit Dance God. And so that the movie sort of changes to, in subtle ways. I mean, like, we're not talking about like massive stylistic changes to make this point. It's subtle enough to make you feel as an audience member that, when Tony's dancing, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Whereas the rest of the world is crap. And that's a testament to, how good of a director Badham is and how great his cinematographer and his production design and his whole team was in just creating this world.
You're watching someone like fully let loose.
Yeah.
You're kind of getting all the pent up energy from everywhere else, and you're seeing that personality on the dance floor. And part of what I liked about this movie was that for several of the montages, whether it's the dance competition, whether it's the dance rehearsals, whether it's just getting to know Tony at the start of the movie, the dance montages aren't cut to any kind of like musical or lip syncing, and they're not just like brief to let you know, okay, he's on the dance floor. Like, you were seeing a story unfold. Like, you're staying on a dance for 1 or 2 minutes. You know what I'm saying? And you're really letting that character express themselves. And that's it's an in-between between, very tight minimalistic narrative storytelling, which we've seen in other dance movies, and like full-blown musical. And I thought that was super cool as well. And it makes, characters can form bonds. Like with Stephanie, you can see them starting to fall in love without them sharing a word. And that final scene on the dance floor at the competition when they kiss, like, it's kind of unexpected, but like, when you see them what they're feeling. And like, the movie is letting you breathe with those emotions. It's not trying to say, here's what I'm feeling. It's not network TV, like just pages of dialogue projecting how these characters are feeling. And so like, I think restraint is always the mark of mature storytelling oftentimes, and this movie excels in that, actually, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if I would use restraint specifically, but I think it's restraint in the right places. I think what the movie
Certainly.
does is it's sort of like it relinquishes restraint for the sake of the dance sequences. The dance sequences are wonderfully and beautifully over the top because this is a very subjective movie, and it's very subjective to Tony's perspective. So restraint in those instances would be dishonest. I mean, what it is I think it's a very, very honest movie, and then you contrast that with like the stuff with his family and, the conflict with his family and with his brother, which is this whole sort of thing that comes in around the middle of the movie and causes Tony to sort of, doubt his own place in his family, but then his own place in the club and in his nightlife. And, it's just a very, it's just a very brutal setting, and it's a very brutal movie.
Yeah, I think everyone is going through some kind of traumatic change in the movie or traumatic personal experience. Like, even Tony's brother has quit the priesthood, and he was kind of the golden child of the family. He was how his, working class Italian parents, felt like they had passed on some kind of purpose or value to their kid, and even he's down disillusioned with the priesthood. And you have one of Tony's friends who's just knocked up I guess what's his girlfriend, but he's talking about her in very unkind terms and is just trying to find a way out of it. And yeah, it's a story of people in peril, honestly.
But it's interesting too, how the movie teases out these elements as opposed to sort of dropping you in. Like you're constantly, every time you're with his family, they're always judging him in relation to his brother, so that when the brother finally comes home, it's this very big moment for everybody where they're like, oh crap, if he's a failure, then what does that make Tony? And then his friend, whose name is escaping me. He's a younger guy who sort of hangs out with his group of friends and is dealing with his girlfriend getting an unplanned pregnancy, and how this, Tony just like keeps ignoring this and passing this off, and the movie even like sort of ignoring it and passing it off, but constantly reminding you that it's there, so that when this character, spoiler alert, kills himself basically at the end of the movie, you just feel the cumulative effect of that, and you see Tony's small but decidedly consequential role in allowing that to happen, and it just really makes the emotional impact big.
Well, did you think, I mean, do you think he fell on purpose? Because to me, it looked like he was definitely suicidal and in some kind of emotional crisis, but it seemed like he fell.
I mean, okay, you're right. I mean, it wasn't like because there's this whole thing where they like to mess around on the bridge leading into Manhattan, and that's very, very dangerous. But like when this kid starts doing it, he's very, very intoxicated, and he's in a
Emotional stupor.
Horrible emotional state. So it's like, you're right, he doesn't kill himself per se, but I mean, he puts himself in a situation that he knows to be dangerous because, his life has become so catastrophic and so unlivable to the point where it doesn't feel like it matters to him in that instance.
Another thing that's really interesting about the scene is it's slowly ratcheting up tension to some kind of tragedy. It's just, you can tell something bad is going to happen because the movie keeps picking up intensity. Tony's becoming more unhinged. They got into like a fist fight with a local gang. They're all drunk. You just watched like 2 different rapes in different situations. Like things are flying off the handle by the end. And I think it's designed that way because once you get to the bridge, these guys are at their lowest and they're completely, like I said, unhinged. And when they go out on the ledge, it's already been planted that it's very dangerous. Something's going to happen, but you don't know who. I mean, you don't know. At one point, I honestly thought that Annette was going to kill herself.
I was literally about to say, I thought that's where that whole arc was going. And honestly, I mean, like, far be it for me to, criticize a movie for not having a character commit suicide, but I was actually almost like hoping it was going to go there because she felt like such a emotional core to the movie. But I understand why his friend had to do it, and it all made sense. But I definitely thought and really believed that Annette was going to be the one to jump off the bridge.
Weren't you just stressed out watching that? Because it's a long scene. They really milk it for what it's worth. Like, it's not just a quick beat.
Anytime anybody is standing on anything high in a movie, I freak out. I'm just like, get down from there. Like, even if it's a comedy, I'm just like, no. It's the same thing where it's like, anytime anybody gets in a car in a movie now, I'm like conditioned to think the car is going to get into an accident. I don't know if you have this thing with movies too.
Yeah.
Where it's like, every time anybody's in a car ever, I'm just like I'm just like sitting there worried, like, oh man, are they going to get into an accident? Because it's like happened several times in movies where they'll just be in a car and then randomly they'll get into an accident. So now I'm just a very nervous moviegoer is what it is. So
like whenever in House of Cards, like someone gets into their car and there's high stakes, you're like, well, they're going to get kidnapped or they're going to get T-boned or killed or something.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, I just wanted to, at least for me, share my favorite part of the movie, which is really how much of a bookend is built in the DNA of the story. At the onset of the movie, we have Tony coming into the paint store and basically trying to get an advance so that he can buy a snazzy shirt to take to 2001 to help, get more eyes on him on the dance floor. And his boss has basically said, look, I'm going to pay you on Monday because I'm tired of you I know you just blow your money and you regret it. And Tony gets all mad. He just goes, fuck the future. The future doesn't matter. And by the end of the movie, he comes to Stephanie's apartment and says, I got to think about my future. Can we be friends? Like, can you help me with my future? I think like by the time you get to the end, you've completely forgotten about that scene and him, exploding. And I think that's why the movie lands, because at the end of the day, even if you hate this character's guts, even if there is no redemption for him, you see a change of heart, and you see him kind of ashamed by how reckless he was. And I mean, that's why we tell stories. We find people can change. You want to hope that people can change. And when you see that, it's very rewarding for a viewer.
Yeah, I love his boss because he kind of exists to be like every movie sort of has that one character who's sort of the thematic. They're sort of the thematic mouthpiece, and they exist to say the theme at least one point in the movie. And my favorite line is actually the next line in that first scene when he says "fuck the future." The boss says, "No, the future fucks you."
Oh.
And it's like there, the end. Cut to black. Roll credits. But actually, I'll share my favorite scene then, because it's actually my favorite scene is another scene with his boss, and it's later in the movie after Tony's gotten fired, because he's got to go drive Stephanie somewhere, and his boss won't give him time off, so he quits. And then he comes back in several scenes later to sort of ask for his job back, and surprisingly, his boss is like really happy to have him back. It's like the prodigal son has returned, and then he's like walking him around the store, showing him all the people who have been there for like 30, 40, 50 years. And just the look on Tony's face when he realizes like, oh crap, this is not a part-time job. This is my future, is just like, it just speaks to the whole point of the movie so beautifully and so simply. Like that was just personally my favorite scene. So what would you rate this movie at the end of the day?
Okay, I actually wrestled with this on second watch, because there is an argument to be made that the movie loses its way thematically in, towards the end. It starts to tackle too many story arcs, and I was wondering if it was going to land this time, and I still think it did, but I'm thinking, do I knock a point off for it? Regardless, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. Because I think the movie accomplishes what it sets out to do in the broadest sense. And every single story arc is accounted for and has some kind of direction, and it enhances the theme. And, even if it gets a little scattered, it does not ever compromise the quality of the character storytelling and the quality of these story arcs. So I cannot sleep soundly at night without giving it a perfect rating, because I really just think it's that good.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5, honestly, but I really want to stress that I don't think my experience with this movie is done yet. Like I said, my first time watching it I was just very struck by it, because it was not what I was expecting at all. And then I found out there's all these different versions of the movie, and then I hearing about sort of how the movie's evolved for you over time. I really sort of want to keep watching it and especially see the PG version and really sort of sit with it a little bit more. I would dock that point off, because I just personally felt that going into the back half of the movie that it was juggling a little much, and I would have liked it to be a little bit more focused. Specifically when it came to the Annette stuff, I was kind of disappointed that didn't go in a more specific direction, not necessarily her killing herself. Like I don't want any characters in movies to kill themselves, but just a little bit more of an intentional direction. But like I said, I mean, this is a stone cold classic, and if you haven't seen this movie, I would highly recommend you go check it out. It's on Amazon Prime. Everybody's got Amazon Prime, right? Like, but yeah, definitely go watch it, because it's really amazing.
So next week, we are going to be discussing a movie that has been released much more recently. In fact, it came out this year, and it's Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, which is the sequel to 2015 smash hit Jurassic World. This is another movie that I feel like gets misinterpreted in some sense or misjudged. So I'm going to be really excited to dive into that with, the retrospective 6 months, and having watched it several times over the course of those 6 months, and also realizing this movie might really decide if Jurassic Park is going to be a franchise moving forward or not. So it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. I think one of the first videos we ever put up on our YouTube channel was a discussion of one of the first trailers for this movie that came out.
Yeah.
So it'll be kind of like coming full circle. This will also be the last podcast we release by the end of the year. So yeah, definitely check that out. Go check out Elevate. You listening who have not watched it yet, it's up on the YouTube channel. we're really proud of it, Adam and I. We really hope you like it. And until next week, I'm Jackson,
I'm Adam.
and we'll see you next time.